Evening. So this book is called Glasshouse by Charles Stross, and it's been on my reading list for a while now. I think I added it some time back when I saw it in the preview at the end of a different book I read, but it turned out to be both more strange, I guess, and more complex than I originally thought it would be based on the summary that I had. So this is science fiction, and it takes place in a super futuristic world where people can manipulate physical matter in a similar way to the way they can manipulate data. I thought at first that it was a virtual universe, but it's not. So for instance, you can actually make backup copies of yourself or duplicate copies of yourself because they can save your basic, I guess, atomical structure. You can make save points so that, let's say, if you get killed 3 days later, you can revert back to your last saved version. Of course, you won't remember what happened in those 3 days that you were not backed up, but essentially people can live almost forever as long as their primaries and stuff aren't all killed or deleted. You can also be whatever you want to be, and it's not just you can be a man or a woman. You can be a monster, like a mecha creature or a unicorn. It's literally because they're disassembling and reassembling people at the atomic level, people can change anything about themselves, and in this case it includes being able to take away parts of memories that you don't necessarily want to remember. So sometime before the start of this story, they had a really major conflict called the censorship wars. Someone released a virus that infected the gates that people use in order to conduct backups and to heal injuries and so on, and it was deleting parts of people's memories. At this point, no one really knows what part of history the creators of the virus were trying to obscure, because no one can actually trust their memories anymore. But the main character actually comes out of this conflict. He was one of the team that was working to find some way to stop the virus from spreading, to destroy its center points and to protect people in the future from reemergences of this virus. So they fought against things because of the virus, the society got super broken up, and he had cognitive dictatorships where there were groups of people trying to control what everyone thought or believed and so on. And anyways, he was a part of the group fighting all of these things. Not that he remembers any of it. At this point, he doesn't know anything. So after he wakes up, he finds, or he starts to suspect that someone is trying to kill him, and this motivates him to agree to participate in this really extensive experiment. So there's this group of people who purport to be running an anthropological kind of study, from this futuristic standpoint, they consider what we would think of as our modern era as the dark ages, both because record keeping wasn't super complete, and because some of the information was what was likely deleted, so people don't actually know a lot about what it was like to live in quote unquote the dark ages. So they designed a community that's cuts off a lot of their modern technology and recreates what life was like in that particular time period, and they're putting a bunch of people in, but you have to agree to be in there for, I think it was 3 years or something. But because of the lack of technology, and because it's an experiment where everything should theoretically be tracked, Robin figures that if he goes in, he can probably hide fairly effectively from the people chasing him for at least enough time for either of them to give up or for him to figure out what the heck is going on. So he enters this experiment both for the purpose of hiding and because after he got his memory wiped, like he was starting to form a relationship with someone that he met, and that person agreed to go into the experiment as well. Like she's actually the person he learned about it from originally. So he also wants to look for her inside so they can continue like the relation that they began to build. So this is a really complicated kind of story. Like I can't really go too much into it, I think, without giving spoilers. So something I liked was, I think, just with how weird the world was, figuring out how everything worked, like learning about their history and how the society came to be in the state it is now was really interesting. It was also, if you like, what do they call it? Kind of like, not twist endings, but unexpected turns. It was the kind of story where there were like layers upon layers of things that don't seem like what they appear to be at first glance. It makes a lot of sense since it's a world where people can freely change what they look like, but not only that, they can make copies of themselves where copy A might not actually know what copy B is doing, but they're all technically the same person. Like, they eventually recombine, so you get like layers of memories from, people doing different things, but at the same time across different places. So it gets extremely complicated. And for Robin himself, like, who he is, what his mission is, why he is where he is, the things he does, like everything, because a lot of it is even hidden from himself. So as you uncover like all these different layers of what's going on, I think figuring out and piecing together that complexity was really interesting. He also has some pretty, he's the kind of person who thinks quite a lot about things, and I can respect, like, just the way he goes about things like resistance and dealing with, people trying to force everyone to conform to like certain models of behavior or thinking and stuff. And, it's not that he's not afraid or doesn't feel those concerns or pressures like from peers and so on, but he's not the kind of person who lets it stop him from like doing the things that he thinks is right and the things that should be done. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a quote from somewhere else too, when he does make a comment that, all it takes for evil to win, basically, is for good people to do nothing. So he's not someone who wants to allow himself to be the person who does nothing. Anyways, but something I did not like. This story does reference some pretty ugly crimes and some pretty gruesome scenes. Like, for the most part, it's mostly as a looking back in reference, so it's not written like in a super grisly way, but I do think some of it is still really off-putting. Like, I would skip a few pages here and there, like there's mentions of things like really extreme domestic abuse and rape and lynching and some of those really ugly crimes that especially come around, I guess, when people are unforgiving of difference. So yeah, I guess important issues to think about, but can be really disturbing. But yeah, I think I'm still overall trying to digest the story as a whole.